The turning point came not on the field, but behind a mic, when an ESPN Cleveland insider finally confirmed what many suspected. Kevin Stefanski and his staff intentionally buried Shedeur Sanders. No injury report, no suspension, just a quiet erasure of the team's best quarterback prospect. The source laid it out bluntly. Stefanski's issue wasn't with Sanders' arm, but his name. The spotlight, the hype, the baggage.
If you're into the real story and all the messy twists they don't show on highlight reels, go ahead and subscribe. And if you're sticking around to see how this Browns QB chaos plays out, you should definitely be subscribed.
It was all too much for a staff uncomfortable with anything they couldn't control. And so, they tried to control him. Fourth string. Media silence. Pretend he doesn't exist. That control cracked the moment Sanders got a shot. On-field excellence shattered months of misdirection, exposing a team culture that prioritized personal comfort over competitive fairness. Sanders' breakout wasn't just a performance, it was a reckoning. It showed what happens when bias runs unchecked and accountability is an afterthought. The insider didn't just confirm the sabotage, they proved that truth has a way of surfacing, especially when the numbers and the tape are. This story isn't about a rookie quarterback working his way up the depth chart. It's about one of the most blatant cases of internal sabotage we've seen in recent NFL memory. This is about Shedeur Sanders, dominating training camp, outperforming every quarterback on the roster, and being buried on purpose. According to insiders, the Cleveland Browns coaching staff, led by head coach Kevin Stefanski, actively chose to suppress Sanders. We're not talking about a simple delay in playing time or developmental strategy. We're talking about a fourth-string placement, total public silence, and 2 straight months of media blackouts. All while Sanders was statistically the best quarterback. And now, the leaks are out, the receipts are everywhere. And this so-called strategy is backfiring in the loudest way possible. Let's be clear, this wasn't a performance issue. ESPN Cleveland insiders confirmed that Shedeur Sanders led in virtually every QB metric during training camp. Highest rating, best efficiency, strongest decision-making. You name it, he had it. But he never saw the field. Not because he didn't earn it, but because the staff didn't want him there. Insiders allege Stefanski and others were operating under an internal agenda. An agenda that had nothing to do with talent and everything to do with perception. The name Sanders, the proximity to Coach Prime, the massive media spotlight, it all clashed with the image this coaching staff wanted to project. So instead of adapting to talent, they fought it. They kept Sanders buried, benched, and invisible. No reps, no praise. Not even a public comment. 2 months of active erasure. That's not coaching. That's politics. And the second Shedeur finally got a real shot, he lit it up. 364 yards. 4 touchdowns. Clean execution. Leadership. Poise. Everything the numbers predicted, but the coaches refused to acknowledge. So now the silence is being shattered. And what's coming out isn't. Multiple sources confirmed this wasn't a case of bad judgment or a coaching gamble gone wrong. This was about internal bias. About protecting egos. About controlling the narrative. The organization had a chance to lean into raw, undeniable talent, and they chose to pretend it didn't exist. They looked at a breakout star and said, "Not now, not you." And the reasoning? Pure speculation, fueled by personal discomfort. That name, that media attention, that Coach Prime energy they couldn't control. Sanders wasn't just a quarterback, he was a walking storyline. And that scared them. So instead of managing the situation with integrity, they shut it down. But now, the story they tried to kill is alive, louder, and backed by data. These recent leaks expose more than just one coach's mistake. They reveal a systemic flaw in how this organization handles evaluation, bias, and accountability. The coaching staff had access to every metric proving Sanders should be in the mix. They saw it. They knew it. And they still chose to ignore it. That's not just bias. That's a deliberate misuse of information. They had a chance to lean into objectivity, let performance lead the way, and build a competitive QB room based on results. Instead, they stuck to preconceived opinions. They let subjective bias cloud objective truth. That kind of leadership? It's a liability. Now the fallout is spreading. Fans are asking questions. Analysts are digging into the timeline. And every no comment from Stefanski is making things worse. Because when you intentionally suppress talent, bury your best performer, and the receipts hit the airwaves, there's no walking that back. This isn't just a Shedeur Sanders story. It's a cautionary tale for any organization that pretends to value meritocracy, while making decisions behind closed doors based on feelings, politics, and fear of the spotlight. And let's not forget, Sanders didn't just wait around. He persevered. He stayed ready. He didn't blast the team on social media. He didn't whine or play into the drama. He just kept showing up. Quiet. Focused. Waiting. Then, when they had no choice but to give him a chance, he proved what the numbers had been screaming for months. He's that guy. That's not just athletic talent. That's mental toughness. That's character. That's a product of faith, discipline, and a support system that didn't let him crumble when the doors slammed. You can thank Coach Prime for that one. Because even while the Browns staff ignored him, his foundation didn't. His circle reminded him who he was. That he didn't need validation to keep working. That talent plus resilience beats politics every time. And now, the narrative has flipped. Stefanski and the coaching staff are stuck explaining how the fourth-string QB just became the most electric player on the field. Insiders are talking. Whistleblowers are naming names. And the fan base? They're done accepting vague answers. This is the kind of scandal that forces real change. Or should. Because it doesn't just affect Shedeur. It affects the entire locker room. When players see talent ignored, data dismissed, and decisions based on personal feelings, they lose trust. And once trust is gone, culture breaks. There are real consequences when leadership fails this badly. It's not just a PR crisis, it's a fracture in team cohesion. And right now, the Browns are staring straight into that reality. KS. What makes this story even more damning is how avoidable it was. All they had to do was follow the numbers, acknowledge the performance, let Sanders compete, not be handed the starting job, just given a fair chance. But instead, they ran a campaign of silence and suppression. They tried to downplay the story, but ended up creating a bigger one. And now, the truth is out. And it's not going back in the box. So where does this all go? For the Browns, it means scrutiny. From the front office down. Every evaluation process, every depth chart decision, every communication strategy. They're all under the microscope now. And they should be. Because once you start making football decisions based on personal bias instead of actual performance, you're not running a team. You're running a narrative. And narratives don't win. For Shedeur Sanders, this could be the beginning of a different kind of legacy. Not just the son of a legend. Not just another dual-threat quarterback. But a player who broke through intentional roadblocks and proved his value with receipts, not rhetoric. He didn't win a popularity contest. He won the right way, by letting a field do the... This whole story is a brutal reminder that organizations need more than just talent on the roster. They need accountability at the top. They need leaders who don't flinch when someone challenges the status quo. Because if the Browns had done the right thing from the beginning, we wouldn't be here. But they didn't. They chose control over competition. And Shedeur Sanders exposed all of it, without saying a word. If you're still watching this scandal unfold and asking yourself how it ever got this far, you're not alone. Drop a comment. Tell us what you think about the Browns' decision-making. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more breakdowns, blow-ups, and the wild stories they didn't want you to see. Because if this saga proved anything, it's that no matter how hard they try to bury the truth, it always finds the end zone. And here's the thing. This wasn't just a misstep or a misunderstanding. This was a coordinated effort. According to what's now been leaked, there were voices inside the organization screaming for Shedeur Sanders to get a chance. Analysts, staffers, people who saw the data every single day, people who watched him work. But those voices were overruled. Not because Sanders wasn't ready, but because someone higher up made a decision. He's not playing. That's not football logic. That's personal politics. The name Sanders wasn't the problem. The problem was what that name meant to the people trying to control the Browns' image, legacy, expectations, media frenzy. Stefanski and his staff didn't want to navigate any of that. They wanted safe. They wanted silence. And ironically, by trying to avoid the noise, they created the loudest scandal of the season. You can't script a bigger organizational because once Sanders touched the field and put up elite-level numbers, every excuse they had disappeared. They couldn't say he wasn't ready. They couldn't claim he didn't understand the system. He didn't just do well, he exposed the entire facade. One game, 4 touchdowns, and 364 yards later, and the entire world was asking the same question. Why was he ever on the bench? And now, Stefanski's sitting in post-game pressers giving the bare minimum, saying things like, "We evaluate talent every day, and all decisions are made in the best interest of the team." But nobody's buying that anymore. Not when we have the data. Not when ESPN Cleveland is out here confirming that Sanders was QB1 before he ever stepped on the game day turf. You don't have to be a football expert to know what this really was. A coach had a bias. A staff followed suit. And the only reason the truth got out is because Shedeur Sanders forced them to see it. And let's be honest, this is exactly what happens when ego meets accountability. Coaches don't like being wrong, especially about a player who brings more spotlight than they're comfortable with. Stefanski didn't want to be the guy who gave in to hype. So he buried the player, ignored the metrics, and tried to wait it out. But Shedeur's performance made that impossible. This whole thing is unraveling like a slow-motion car crash. Except it's not just Stefanski's reputation on the line. It's the Browns' culture, their credibility. Because what does this say to other players on that roster? That even if you earn it, you might still be ignored? That your name, your background, or your image might matter more than your performance? That's how locker rooms start to break. Because players talk. They know who's putting in work. They see who's showing out in practice. And when they watch a guy ball out, only to be shoved to the bottom of the chart for non-football reasons, it breeds resentment, doubt, division. And that kind of energy doesn't just go. That's why the fallout from this situation isn't just about one start. It's about what comes next. Because now that Shedeur has cracked the starting lineup, and let's be real, there's no going back now. Every future decision is under a microscope. If he plays well again, and Stefanski starts walking back his old decisions, people are going to ask why it took this long. If Shedeur hits a bump, some in the building will rush to say, "See? That's why we waited." It's lose-lose for the people who tried to control the... But the biggest L is already locked in. They tried to erase a player who could have helped them win. And instead of developing that talent in real time, they let 2 months slip by. 2 months of system reps. 2 months of chemistry building. 2 months where the Browns could have been building something around a quarterback who now looks like a breakout star. They didn't just waste time, they wasted trust. And for what? To avoid a headline? Let's not forget, Sanders wasn't pushing for a handout. He didn't walk into camp demanding starter treatment. He earned it through performance, through preparation, through data that clearly backed him up. That's what makes this so damning. Because it's not just Stefanski being wrong. It's Stefanski knowing he was wrong and continuing with the agenda anyway. Because the alternative meant admitting that the guy with the famous dad and all the media buzz might also just be better. That kind of pride doesn't just cost games, it kills careers. And now, there's a real conversation happening behind the scenes. Stefanski's leadership is being questioned. Front office staff are re-evaluating how talent is assessed. And fans? Fans are done being patient. The Browns have been rebuilding for years. Every season, it's a new quarterback, a new plan, a new hope. And now, they finally have a QB who showed up and outperformed every expectation. And they tried to bury him. That's not just frustrating. That's infuriating. Because if Shedeur had never gotten his chance, we may have never known what he could really do. He would have been written off as another raw talent who couldn't crack the rotation, all because of coaching bias. This is why insider leaks matter. This is why media accountability matters. Because without those disclosures from ESPN Cleveland, this would have stayed buried. The coaching staff would have kept trotting out their preferred quarterbacks, fans would have kept asking questions, and Sanders would have been labeled a project. Instead, the truth is out. And it's ugly. But it's also powerful. Because Shedeur's success didn't just silence his doubters. It exposed an entire broken system. It showed what happens when internal politics outweigh performance. And it reminded everyone watching that real talent doesn't stay hidden forever. Not when there's data. Not when there are eyes on the field. And definitely not when the player is as mentally locked in as Shedeur. The way he handled this? Textbook resilience. He didn't feed the headlines. He didn't call out the coach. He let the moment come to him. And when it did, he was undeniable. That kind of poise is rare. That kind of control under pressure, even rarer. And it says more about his leadership than anything else. While the staff scrambled to protect their image, Sanders just focused on being ready. And when the system finally ran out of excuses, he delivered. Plain and simple. There's no spinning that. And now that the truth is in the open, there's only one direction this goes, forward. With Sanders starting. With Stefanski answering to the media. With internal reform finally on the table. And with fans, media, and players demanding a level of accountability that's been long overdue in Cleveland. Because this wasn't just about one player. It was about everything the NFL claims to stand for: merit, competition, development. And how quickly that all falls apart when the wrong people are calling the shots. And now, with the spotlight on full blast and the smoke from this firestorm still thick in the air, the Cleveland Browns are facing the one thing they tried hardest to avoid: accountability. Not the buzzword version of accountability, the kind you hear in press conferences when coaches say we need to look at the tape or we hold ourselves to a high standard. No, this is real accountability. The kind that comes when your entire decision-making process gets dragged into the public eye. When whistleblowers start talking. When the data says one thing and your actions say the opposite. When your fourth-string quarterback, whom you tried to keep off the field, becomes your most dangerous weapon in a single game. And it's not just about Shedeur Sanders anymore. His breakout exposed everything wrong with the way this team. The favoritism. The lack of transparency. The refusal to let performance dictate opportunity. Let's go back to that depth chart for a second. For quarterbacks, Sanders at the very bottom. And not because of scheme fit. Not because of mechanical issues. He was outperforming the rest of the QB room every single day in camp, according to insiders. And yet, instead of moving up the chart, he stayed frozen. For 2 whole months. 2 months where no one outside the building even knew he existed. 2 months where Stefanski refused to mention his name in interviews. 2 months of actively avoiding the player who, by all metrics, should have been at least competing for the job. What does that tell you? It tells you this wasn't about football. It was about control. Shedeur came in with a legacy, a media presence, and a mindset that didn't fit the mold they were comfortable with. And rather than adjust, rather than rise to the moment and lead like professionals, they tried to shrink him. Tried and failed. Because once he got that chance, there was no denying it. You can ignore whispers. You can bury practice footage. You can write off internal metrics. But you can't hide a 364-yard, 4-touchdown performance in front of millions of people. That's when it all broke open. The silence ended. The insiders started talking. And suddenly, what looked like a depth chart decision started to look like a scandal. Let's be real, Stefanski and the Browns didn't just get it wrong. They built an entire internal narrative against their best player. They kept the media in the dark. They fed fans half-truths. And they hoped no one would notice. But the moment Sanders stepped on that field and torched a defense, the truth became too obvious to hide. And now, the narrative is because you can't pretend this was a developmental strategy. Developmental strategies don't bury statistically superior players. You don't sideline your top performer unless you have an agenda. And according to multiple insiders, that's exactly what happened here. The agenda? Keep the Sanders hype train out of Cleveland. Avoid the attention. Control the locker room dynamic. Preserve the coaches, all at the expense of wins. All at the expense of merit. All at the expense of a quarterback who earned more. This is where leadership matters most, and this is where it failed. Completely. Because good leadership welcomes competition. It adapts. It recognizes when someone is outshining the rest and adjusts accordingly. What we saw here was the opposite. A closed-door culture protecting itself from a player who didn't fit its comfort zone. This is where leadership matters most, and this is where it failed. Completely. Because good leadership welcomes competition. It adapts. It recognizes when someone is outshining the rest and adjusts accordingly. What we saw here was the opposite. A closed-door culture protecting itself from a player who didn't fit its comfort zone. And the message that sends to the rest of the team? Devastating. If performance doesn't matter, then what does? It tells players that politics outweigh preparation, that bias can outrank ability, that if you come in with the wrong name, the wrong energy, or the wrong narrative behind you, you'll be sidelined no matter how hard you work. And that's not just a bad look. It's toxic. What Sanders did by stepping up and obliterating the excuses wasn't just about proving himself. It was about reclaiming the system, exposing the cracks, forcing the hand of people who thought they could suppress talent forever. They can't. And now the Browns are left scrambling, trying to rewrite the story in real time. Now Stefanski wants to acknowledge Shedeur. Now the coaches are talking about what he brings to the table. Now they're praising his poise, his leadership, his instincts. Where was all of that 2 months ago? Where was that support when he was running scout team reps while underperforming QBs got the spotlight? Where was the coaching leadership when the data clearly showed he was outperforming the rest of the room? That's what makes this all feel so calculated and so unforgivable. Because the organization knew. They had the numbers, the film, the feedback. They had everything they needed to elevate him based on performance alone. And they still said no. Because it wasn't about development. It was about discomfort. Discomfort with his story. Discomfort with his fame. Discomfort with his father. Discomfort with the reality that Shedeur Sanders wasn't just legit. He was probably the best quarterback on the roster the entire. But no one wanted to deal with that. And now, they have to. There's no more hiding. No more spin. No more protecting egos at the expense of results. The genie's out of the bottle, and Shedeur isn't going anywhere. So what does this mean for the Browns? It means leadership needs to be evaluated seriously. Not just Stefanski, but everyone who co-signed this silence. Everyone who ignored the tape. Everyone who kept quiet while a future star was boxed out of opportunities he earned. It means the organization has to rebuild not just their offense, but their... Because now that this has gone public, the damage is done. Every player, every fan, every reporter is watching to see what happens next. Whether lessons will be learned, or if this is just another PR cleanup job. And for Sanders, it means he has the stage now. Finally. Fully. Not because it was given to him, but because he took it. Through composure. Through preparation, through proof. His journey to that starting role wasn't just about skill. It was about perseverance in the face of a system designed to ignore him. And now that he's there, no one can say he didn't earn it. No one can pretend it was handed to him. He forced the narrative to change. And if that's not the definition of resilience, what is? If this story has you shaking your head like the rest of us, hit the like button, tell us what you think in the comments. And subscribe for more breakdowns of sports drama, power moves, and the moments when the truth finally breaks through. Because this wasn't just a leak. This was a reckoning. And it's far from over.